I don't think anyone thinks it's going to happen to them. And that's the big problem here. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand.
A disturbing trend is emerging nationwide, including here in Philadelphia. Men and women are sounding the alarm that they've been drugged in bars.
We have a growing crisis.
I was drugged at a bar here in New Orleans, and I think it's time that we talk about it.
Boston police putting out the warning after growing reports on social media.
I called the police, and they told me that they couldn't really do anything about it or make a report.
90% of people do not report this problem.
One report showed a young woman found unconscious on a bench. Another, not sure if she'd been assaulted.
The floors were moving, the walls were moving. I think that if I hadn't got help and called an ambulance, I could have died in my apartment.
We've heard from victims, police, and colleges about the rise in spiked drinks.
I was hesitant to even tell the story because it's embarrassing and it's somewhat traumatic.
We've been in touch with more than a dozen people who believe their drinks were spiked at bars and clubs in Boston this year.
I did not remember getting an Uber. I don't remember getting back to the hotel. I don't remember any of it.
Everybody should be aware of this problem.
By choosing to drug somebody, you are choosing to take the chance to kill them.
Being roofied alone is a violent act.
Lawmakers are now calling it a disturbing public health crisis across the Commonwealth.
The reality of drink spiking is it doesn't matter who you are, what you're drinking. Everybody should be aware of this problem.
Tonight, police are putting out a warning to watch your drink. More people report getting drugged at bars in Boston.
This problem actually happens. Not only does it happen, but we have had thousands of comments on our social media talking about people who have had their drink spiked by not only strangers, but by friends and family members. And it is time that we actually do something about it. The reality of drink spiking is it doesn't matter who you are, what you're drinking. Everybody should be aware of this problem.
It was St. Patrick's Day 2023, the bar crawl in Boston. I had decided that I was going to be the designated driver. I didn't drink at any of the bars. I had waters until we got to the third bar. I decided to have my first beer. After I had had that beer, I started to feel fuzzy. And that's when things started to shift.
I would have never expected to be roofied doing an activity that wasn't centered around alcohol and partying. I got into the Boston Latin dance community because it offered an alternative nightlife experience. It was an activity not centered around alcohol and more joy, music, movement, and genuine connection. And I felt so lucky to find the community. I started going to monthly Latin dance socials in the Boston area, and it became a safe haven for me. I felt really safe. My roofie story took place in spring 2024. I was roofied at a Latin dance event in the Cambridge area. My water bottle was tampered.
The first signs that something was wrong was as we left that third bar, things were really fuzzy and my memory cuts out completely. My memory cuts back in for a brief moment over the toilet in a pizza place and cuts back in again In the car on the way home, I was in the back seat and I was being held up by a friend.
The Latin dance event venue was really upscale and classy. There was a dance floor in the middle, high top tables on the side. After I said hi to some friends, I gathered my belongings and I got set up at a high top table by the dance floor. I had a sports water bottle with a click top so that the spout was covered. The tables were covered in open cups and water bottles throughout the venue. I decided it was time to go home, and I went back to my table. I ordered an Uber on my phone, and I took some sips from my water bottle one last time. In hindsight, at the end of the night, I realized that my water tasted funny, but I attribute it to just having refilled it from the tap water in the bathroom. I got in the Uber around 12:30 a.m. I was alone. I was sober. I started to feel really unwell. I was profusely sweating. I was really hot. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. And reality struck when the driver pulled up to my apartment building, and it felt like I was walking through a fun house. The floors were moving, the walls were moving, and my brain and my body weren't connected. I wasn't coordinated. The door was right in front of me and I couldn't get there.
I felt really confused because I had no memory of what happened. I had never experienced anything like that before. My friends tell me that in the Uber, I complained of not being able to see and that everything was black. It was in the daylight. At the pizza place, I was vomiting nonstop. I don't remember any of it. The next morning, I just felt so hungover after only one beer.
I made it to my bed, luckily with my phone in my hand, and I collapsed backwards into the mattress. My body felt like it was 3,000 pounds. I felt paralyzed, I felt heavy. I felt like I couldn't even lift my head. I called my best friend and I explained in a panic, I had a night out, something's wrong. I'm not okay, I don't know what to do. And she said, I'll stay on the line, you call 911 and you let me know when they're coming. Thankfully, I was able to turn myself over on my side because I couldn't stop throwing up. When the paramedics knocked on my door, it took all of my energy to crawl onto the floor and crawl to the door because I couldn't stand. They had to pick me up off the floor, they put me in a stretcher, and they rushed me to Brigham Hospital ER. I think that if I hadn't got help and called an ambulance, I could have died in my apartment.
The next morning, I woke up and I had no memory of anything from once I left the bar until waking up the next morning. I spent a lot of that day in bed, beating myself up over it. I looked up the symptoms of drink spiking and realized that a lot of the symptoms applied to me.
When I arrived at the hospital, the paramedics and the hospital staff, they definitely believed something was wrong and that this was real and I wasn't faking it. I don't know that they believed that I was sober and I was a victim of being drugged. It felt more like they thought that I was drunk and at fault for what was happening. I told the paramedics multiple times I was sober and I thought I was drugged. I told the hospital staff the same. The only blood test they did when I arrived was to check my alcohol levels, which I knew were gonna be normal. And they were. It wasn't until many hours later that they ran drug tests. And I learned that there's a very narrow window for them to catch the drugs in your system because they move so fast. My drug test results were inconclusive, but the hospital staff determined as a diagnosis that I was definitely intoxicated from a tampered drink and had critical dehydration. Despite being a victim of violence, they interestingly never brought a police officer into the room or reported the incident. And I was sent home after I was recovered.
It took me 3 full days to go to the hospital. I had no idea that the drugs would be out of my system in 24 hours or less. So when I went and I got my tox screen back, there was no drugs in my system. I had no idea. I had not known anyone that had had their drink spiked before. I had no idea there was a certain amount of time that you had to go to the hospital and get tested to get a positive test result. Immediately after I realized what was happened, I was crushed. Immediately after it happened, I felt so small. I was really caught up in, well, who did this to me and why did they do it? Why me? That was all I could think of.
Most survivors have this feeling of shame that when they wake up the next day, it's not something that they're immediately going to be talking about. It could take years for them to actually come and tell their story. Between the shame of the survivor and the guilt that society or victim blame that society places on the survivor, it doesn't create a space for survivors to talk about it.
Videos of people claiming they had drugs put in their drinks in downtown Nashville, something like the videos that you see right here.
So I was roofied in Nashville on Broadway. January of last year, I was at a conference and Jason was with me and we went downtown on Broadway.
I was out. I had a couple of drinks with a friend. We had like two mimosas, and we went up to a rooftop bar in Nashville to say hi to some friends. We had one drink there, and I don't know what happened after that.
With more stories popping up on social media of women and men getting drugged at bars and restaurants, Boston police are stepping in, asking people to report their experiences.
I was drugged at a bar here in New Orleans, and I think it's time that we talk about it.
We spoke with city officials and residents who all agree that drink spiking is an issue in West Hollywood and in the region.
A couple of weeks ago, I was roofied at a work event here in LA, and I was hesitant to even tell this story because it's embarrassing and it's somewhat traumatic, but I figured the most responsible thing I can do is share my experience, because if it can prevent it from happening to even one other person, then fine, the embarrassment is worth it. I don't care.
Towards the end of the night, within about a 20-minute span, I did not remember getting an Uber. I called the Uber on my phone. I did this. I don't remember getting an Uber. I don't remember the color of the car. I don't remember the driver coming to pick us up. I don't remember any part of this. I don't remember getting back to the hotel, getting in an elevator, walking over to our room. I don't remember any of it.
The hotel called an ambulance for me. They took me in an ambulance to a hospital where they said I just had alcohol intoxication. They weren't helping me with drug testings. They didn't do any of that.
We asked area hospitals what their protocols are when someone comes in believing they were drugged. Vanderbilt University Medical Center told us they don't have the capability to run tests for GHB, rohypnol, and other drink spiking drugs. Due to limited availability of labs, the patients can only get a full toxicology screening if they believe they were sexually assaulted with law enforcement's involvement.
I could not keep anything down. Water, Gatorade, anti-nausea medication. I was sweating. I was hot and cold at the same time. I was dizzy. I mean, it was like the worst stomach flu you've ever had. Like, I had to get injections to stop vomiting. I had to have fluids. I'm laying under blankets, chewing on ice chips. I mean, it was horrible.
The next thing I remember is waking up in my bed, 1 p.m. the next day. I have absolutely no recollection of how I got there, when I left, what has transpired in between. I'm very, very anxious suddenly, and I shoot up in bed, and I realize, okay, well, I'm not hungover, I blacked out, but I feel completely fine. I look across the room, and what do I see but not me having had thrown up all over my mirror, all over my shelf, all over the carpet. It's a mess in there. So at this point, I start freaking out. I'm calling my friends. I'm trying to figure out what happened.
When I say I had never felt this level of sick and disoriented in my life, I was aggressively throwing up. I could not stand up. Jason had to carry me to the bed, and I just said, I just want to sleep. And when I woke up that next morning, I remembered nothing.
So I called the police yesterday, and they told me that they couldn't really do anything about it or make a report unless they know that I was drugged. So I went back to a different hospital yesterday, I went to the emergency room and I told them the story. They kind of acted like I was the only person that they've ever seen come into a hospital that got roofied or drugged, and they didn't know what to do. It should not be this hard to get drug tested for those type of things. They should have a protocol. They should be able to help me. And they treated me like poop. So here I am. I am trying to take matters to myself. I'm not really sure where to go from here.
The crazy part about this is that Jason was with me all night long, by my side. The only time he was not with me was when I went to the bathroom. So whoever was doing this and putting roofies in drinks, they were that good. It takes 2 seconds.
I don't know who could have done it because I was around that drink the whole time that it existed, and I never noticed anything. Every single woman listening to this right now already knows this. This is for men. Do not drink a drink if you haven't seen it poured, if it hasn't been in your hand, if you don't know every single thing that's in it. Don't drink it. I don't care if the drinks are $50 and you don't want to pay for another one. It is not worth it. What could have happened to me in that situation could have been so much worse had I not been there with friends who made sure I got home.
Please be aware of your surroundings. Please stay with your people. Get drink covers, whatever you need to do. But that was definitely one of the scariest times in my life.
I just want to make it aware that this is happening everywhere. And it's just like super frustrating for me and probably any other girl who needs to go to the hospital and want to get those kinds of things for them, like to be treated.
I don't believe this happened because I'm in New Orleans. I believe this happened because I'm a woman, and unfortunately I live in a society where that means that some people want to hurt me.
So please be careful.
I had dropped Bailey off. We had set up her dorm room. I left on the Thursday night after spending a week with her in Miami. We didn't have service because we were 3 hours offshore. And then Sunday morning, I finally got a signal, so I tried texting her. And it bounced back. And right after the text bounced back, the phone rang, and it was the Miami-Dade Police Department. The officer asked me if I was Bailey's mom, and I said yes. And he said, your daughter is alive, but there's been a terrible accident, and you need to come to Miami right away. According to the text messages we pieced together, Bailey had left the bar with her friends because she was just drinking water and she was getting bored. To be honest, she wanted to head back to the dorm rooms. It was late. Another boy was going to meet her on the sidewalk, and they would share an Uber together. When she went outside of the club, he stood her up, and he wasn't there. So she sent a text back to the girls to let them know she was alone. They told her to come back in, but she wasn't able to get back in the club because of her fake ID. So she said that she was going to get an Uber ride back to the dorm rooms on her own. She called for an Uber, and while she was waiting, she was approached by 2 men.
While out with friends, she got separated. An Uber receipt shows she ordered a ride for 1:14 a.m., but canceled it at 1:20.
The men told her they were University of Miami med students and that they were also headed back to campus, and for Bailey to share a ride with them, they told her their Uber would be there shortly and it would be there before hers, to call and cancel her Uber and jump in with them and ride share, which she did.
In surveillance videos obtained by News 9 Investigates, Bailey enters a different rideshare with 2 men she describes as random and sketchy in texts.
It wasn't long before Bailey realized that she had made the wrong decision. The guys were not med students at all. And in fact, the Uber ride she was in was not headed towards campus. In fact, it was headed in a different direction. At that point, she started texting her girlfriends, letting them know that she was lost in an Uber with some sketchy guys. She didn't know who they were and that they wouldn't tell her, their real names. So she was sitting in the middle between the two men. They got out of the car to go get water. One of the men stayed in the car with her, and there's the video footage of the door opening. You can see Bailey sitting in the car.
At 1:31 a.m., the vehicle pulls over, one man exits, then returns with a cup at 1:36 a.m. At 1:44, Bailey's text suggests the men want her to drink the water.
At that point, she's texting her friends, they want me to drink the water. They're trying to get me to drink the water. Too much, she says. She does drink some of the water, but over a little while of time, over a period of time, she then spills the water in the Uber, hoping to get the Uber driver's attention. He tells them that she has to pay for the cleaning and ask them to all get out. They get kicked out, and fortunately, they were in an area that was a little bit populated and she can disappear into the crowd. She calls the sorority sisters for help, asking them to come get her, that she no longer knows how to use her phone. She can't call an Uber now. She doesn't know how to use the app. She proceeds to tell them she doesn't know how to use the GPS, and they let her know that they're gonna send her a PIN by text to see if she can open the PIN. Fortunately, she opens the PIN and says, "Thank God, I can see it." They told her to just follow it, just keep walking, and they would track her as she walked. What they didn't realize is that if she wasn't capable of using the app on her phone, she wasn't capable of walking 3 miles in the pouring rain at night.
Just after 3 a.m., a witness tells police in an interview Bailey walked directly into oncoming traffic and was hit.
Absolutely, positively not aware of traffic at all.
When we landed in Miami and found out how just terrible her condition was and how close to death she actually was, we started questioning why she was walking at 3 in the morning in the pouring rain in downtown Miami. She had walked 3 miles alone at night. We asked the police to look into this. She had been hit by a car. At that point, they started looking at video footage. And when they saw the video footage of Bailey walking on the sidewalk and walking across the street, they knew. They brought it to our attention and said, "We actually think your daughter had been given a spiked drink and that she was drugged when she crossed the street." So when the cars were coming up against her and laying on their horn and flashing their lights and swerving around her, she was completely oblivious to it. In fact, one of the cars came right up to her hip and laid on the horn, and she didn't even turn and look at the car or flinch. That being said, she didn't stumble and she didn't walk like a drunk person. She walked perfectly straight. Zombie-like, in fact. Despite circumstantial evidence, the text messages, the video of the guys, the Uber driver, anybody who was questioned regarding this case, including the 2 men who were questioned by police, without proof that there had been a drug in Bailey's system, there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. In the state of Florida, the law says that hospitals do not have to do toxicology or blood alcohol levels on a trauma patient. And the reason why is because the insurance companies will deny the claim. And so because this is a routine practice, nothing was drawn on Bailey. When we heard that there was a likelihood that she had been drugged and crossed the street impaired and confused, we wanted a toxicology drawn on her. But we didn't have the legal papers done. We didn't have a healthcare proxy or a HIPAA waiver. And HIPAA law protects the patient. Perhaps Bailey didn't want us to know that there was drugs or alcohol on board, and as a result, we weren't allowed to ask for that as parents. The hospital had taken guardianship, and the ethics committee would order that if they felt it necessary. The police did feel that it was necessary to have the toxicology, and they ordered it. But by the time we got to all of this, it was way past the 24-hour mark. We were closer to 36 hours when the blood was drawn, and it was all out of Bailey's system. I don't think anyone thinks it's going to happen to them. And that's the big problem here, and that's what we're trying to get people to understand. One thing that Bailey was not careful with was water. She was very careful with alcohol. She was the first one to take away a friend's drink if they hadn't been watching it. She had all the safety precautions, but at the end of the day, she was caught off guard when they gave her a water. So we have a foundation, the Bailey's Wish Foundation, which we are trying to advocate for better policies and changes in the law. Colleges right now, they fall under the Clery Act for disclosure of criminal activity only. And there's a lot of the time that this stuff is just not reported. The colleges know that this happens. There are certain colleges that have higher incidence of drink spiking than others. In fact, there are colleges where drink spiking is happening with their students every single weekend, and this isn't disclosed. So we want transparency for colleges. We want this to be shared with parents and students so that they can be aware, so that there are appropriate precautions taken. Including sex trafficking, which they believe might have been the case with Bailey, given the 5-mile loop she was taken on. Bailey's story was never shared. In fact, it was covered up, and no one at the school was ever told of what the dangers were that she faced. And so we're really wanting to make sure that schools talk about this and they share this information.
Although the exact circumstances of that night in 2018 are unknown and no charges were ever filed in Bailey's death, her family wants her life to be the change for someone else.
We're doing this in her honor, but everything we do, Bailey is with us and she's helping us along the way.
Survivors of date rape drugs joined public leaders at the State House today to support legislation to crack down on drink spiking in Massachusetts. Right now, victims of drink spiking usually cannot be tested at hospitals unless they believe they have been sexually assaulted.
Each individual speaker will have 3 minutes to testify. Please listen carefully for your name and be prepared to begin when called upon. Next, S1537, an act safeguarding victims of illicit drink spiking, Ella McDuff.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. My name is Ella McDuff, and on December 21st, 2022, I went to a Bruins game with my ex-boyfriend. Since sharing my story, I have heard from countless others. We are not rare, we are just rarely believed.
The night that I was drugged, I went to the Bruins game with my ex-boyfriend, and we had a great time, and then we met up with all of his friends at a bar after, and we ordered a round of beers in a bucket, and they came Bud Lights where you had to twist off the cap yourself. And then a little while later, he had to go to the bathroom, so he told me to stay with all of his friends and that he would be right back. I ended up recognizing some people across the bar, so I walked over there to say hello, and that is the last thing that I remember from my night. When he came back from the bathroom, he told me that I had a new drink in my hand, and it was an open glass. I don't know how I got it, who gave it to me, or when I got it, but all I know is that a little while later, I did not feel good, and I told him I wanted to leave. And we called an Uber, and I ended up throwing up in the Uber and throwing up all over him, and we were kicked out. At the time, it was December, and it was freezing cold. My ex called my mom and basically said, I think Ella is dying. She needs to go to the hospital. Something's wrong. It was pouring rain, and it was probably 12:30 at night, and he carried me over his shoulder under a bridge. I don't remember anything about the rest of the night. When I got to the hospital, my mom told me that my ex was carrying me inside, banging on the doors, saying that I needed help. He put me on the ground. Basically, my in and out of consciousness body was just laying there, and my mom told the hospital that I needed a drug test. I was drugged, and I was not just drunk, and something was wrong.
The doctor told my mom that I was just drunk and that I needed to sleep it off. She begged for a drug test multiple times, but he refused. Soon after, my mom discovered that I had gone to the bathroom in my pants, an early symptom of serotonin syndrome.
I was extremely aggressive. Because I was that agitated and aggressive and kicking and biting, they gave me a shot of Haldol, which is a sedative, to calm me down. The next morning, I woke up in a gown, no clothes, my hands and legs tied to the bed, and I had no idea what had happened. They ended up releasing me a few hours later, and I got home and was resting, and my symptoms immediately got worse. I had an extremely high fever. I started to get cramping all over my bodies. If you know what it feels like to have a toe cramp, my entire body cramped up. It's called muscle rigidity. And I ended up having a seizure and being put in the ICU.
Serotonin syndrome is the combination of too many drugs in your system at once. So I had the combination of the Haldol sedative that they had given me the night before, the drug that I was drugged with, Lexapro, which is an anxiety medicine I'm on, and over-the-counter vitamins that I just take every day. And the combination of those gave me serotonin syndrome. While I was in the ICU, the doctors were incredibly sympathetic. They were kind, and it was a very different experience than my first night there.
By the time the hospital acted with urgency, the window to run an accurate toxicology test had closed.
The law in Massachusetts is that hospitals do not have to give you a drug test unless you have also been sexually assaulted. We were told that there is no code for insurance.
Being denied help, denied proof, and denied answers was as traumatic as the night itself. For a long time, I stayed silent. I carried shame and fear that I didn't know how to process.
I don't think I really did cope with being drugged for at least a year. I was extremely embarrassed. I didn't know what had happened.
Since sharing my story, I have heard from countless others. We are not rare, we are just rarely believed. This bill matters. Requiring hospitals to provide timely toxicology tests gives survivors a real chance to seek justice, reclaim power, get answers, and be treated with the urgency that we deserve.
Right now, in Massachusetts, there is a bill that would give victims the chance to have a drug test no matter if they were sexually assaulted or not. I believe that it is necessary in order for victims to, 1, be able to be tested, 2, be able to get treatment, and 3, so hospitals have this data to understand how frequently this is happening. Because this is happening a lot more than people think.
I was lucky to survive, but I could have died from what was in my drink, from the serotonin syndrome, or from being ignored.
It's been about 2.5 years since I was drugged, and I think about it every single time that I am out in a social situation or around drinks. I don't think I'm ever going to stop wondering who did this to me and why. So I share my story to help other people to never have to experience something like this, or if they do, to know that they have a support system of people who have also been through the same thing.
I wish people who turn a blind eye to this crime or act like it doesn't exist really understood the effects of not only what happens that night, but what happens for days and years after.
I have it in the back of my mind all the time, even to this day, even 2 full years after the fact. It's something that I'm still thinking about and still talking about to this day.
It broke my trust in other people, especially spending time in communities where I previously felt safe.
It makes me want to rip my hair out that people don't think that this happens. People are waiting for that moment of, oh, that won't happen to me, until it does. It happens. It's happening. To ignore that this is happening is incredibly naive.
Being roofied alone is a violent act. It's a crime. It's intention to cause harm to people, and it puts someone's life in danger. They could die.
You don't know what kind of medication people are on or what's in their system. By choosing to drug somebody, you are choosing to take the chance to kill them.
We have a growing crisis. There needs to be so much more attention focused on this problem.
We're in an epidemic that's happening in major cities around the country. There isn't a whole lot being done about it right now.
I mean, 90% of people don't report that their drink has been spiked. And there are a variety of reasons for this. I mean, hospitals and doctors will tell you that you're wrong, police officers, bar owners. People won't listen to the victim. The system is not built for our survivors. Do I think states are doing enough to protect their victims? Absolutely not. State legislatures should be doing more research on the problem and understanding why it's happening. We recently helped pass a bill in California mandating drink covers at every single bar. You can walk into a bar and you know that you can have the tools to protect yourself when you get there.
I think the bar that I was at absolutely could have done more to ensure everybody's safety. I think it's really important that venues that we go to have systems in place, such as lids on your cups, to make sure that everybody is safe.
Every single bar, I believe, should have cameras behind the bar where the bartenders are working and in the bar in general. In my instance, if the bar that I was at did have cameras, I would have been able to figure out what had happened to me, who did it, why, and understand a lot more. Not only would that have given me closure, but I would have gotten some more justice than I did.
The hardest part of recovery was that there was no resolution after I was roofied. We need change in our society, policies and systems to take roofing just as seriously as assault and any other violent crime. I had a really nice detective working on my case, but he didn't have what he needed to find the person or even name what drug was used on me. It just all kind of went away, and I had to deal with it in silence for many months. This opportunity to share my story is my way of trying to make sense of what happened and use it for good and change.
I really hope that whoever's listening to this can understand what these survivors not only went through that night, but potentially could be going through forever.